That takes a huge load off. Big
So we do have a lot of folks.
responsibility.
Yeah. So we do have folks who have already joined the call. It's about 4 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and just introduce everybody. So welcome and thank you for attending our Friends from the Field webinar. These webinars are brought to you every month by the Blue Hill Heritage Trust and Island Heritage Trust. My name is Brooke McDonald. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Blue Hill Heritage Trust, and I'm your co-host today with Eli Foreman, who is a land steward from Island Heritage Trust. So by joining the webinar today, you're helping to support both of our organizations, so thank you so much. This webinar is titled, as you can see, Shoreland Zoning, Responsible Development Along Maine's Natural Resources. And before I introduce our speaker, I'm going to hand it over to Eli for a moment to talk a little bit about Zoom.
Yes, so we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And if people have questions, if they just want to write them in the chat, we will take turns reading them at the end of the presentation. And also, Jessica's email will be available if we run out of time. So don't worry, all of your questions will be answered. And yeah, thanks for being here.
All right, thank you so much, Eli. So our webinar today is presented by Jessica Sayers. Jessica is the Assistant Shoreland Zoning Coordinator for the Maine Department of Environmental Protection's Land Bureau, and she's based out of the Bangor office, so she would be serving us on the peninsula and Deer Isle. Her work brings her to the beautifully diverse regions of the state, working with property owners, municipalities, developers, and people like us to ensure mindful development along our shorelines. So I'm going to hand it right over to you, Jessica, if you're ready to go.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Very excited to be here. Like Eli and Brooke said, we'll do some questions and some contact info. So I tried to condense a lot of information into a quick presentation. Shoreland zoning has a lot of language, a lot of rules, a lot of stuff going on. So I'm just going to kind of try to scratch the surface and bring some relevant topics to you folks. So kind of a quick overview. I'm going to touch on like the history of shoreland zoning, some of the basics, and then go over the importance of vegetation in the shoreland zone, chat about some bluff and shoreline stabilization news, and then leave some time for questions. So we'll kind of go through the basics to start with, just so folks have like a general understanding of what shoreland zoning is. Maine legislature first enacted shoreland zoning in 1971, and municipalities started to adopt shoreland zoning standards in 1973. So they've been around for a while. In 1990, things started to really pick up speed, and that's when towns started to have an established shoreland zoning ordinance and map, which they could reference and enforce. So DEP also became involved in 1990. And we set up kind of a base guideline template to kind of use as some standards. Towns can adopt those standards, they can tweak them a little bit, they can modify them, but we use those as kind of the base for what we do. And we call that Chapter 1000. So you might hear me mention that a few times throughout. So just wanted to touch on that. So these guidelines were enacted kind of in a response. We were seeing increasing development and a lot of pressure to build in shoreline areas. And so these rules were put into place. They've been tweaked and strengthened over time and updated, but they're in place to kind of help property owners and towns enforce their rules. So the purpose of shoreline zoning, make sure my slide goes, there we go. A lot of goals and purposes for shoreland zoning. Some are probably more obvious than others, but in all, to better protect the state's water bodies, our natural resources, our wildlife. The state set up some guidelines to minimize pollution and runoff and regulate land use activities in these shoreline areas. Regulation and laws, they're usually well-intentioned, but sometimes the execution of laws and regulation can lose the intent or the science behind why they were put there in the first place. So luckily, the shoreland zoning rules in Maine kind of work together towards an end goal, and that's to protect the resource, but also support property owners and their access and enjoyment of these resources. So let's see here. Couple different roles in between shoreland zoning. Like I said, the towns and the cities, municipalities, they are going to be the entity that enforces shoreland zoning. So property owners have questions or concerns about shoreland zoning. The town is going to be their resource for that kind of information. So the town or city is going to issue local permits. They're going to enforce the shoreland zoning rules. They're going to amend or adopt changes to their ordinance and map. And then on the other side, DEP plays kind of a supportive role. We can approve those changes that they propose. We can provide some technical advice, a lot of site visits, and enforcement assistance. And then we also update and try to change that chapter 1000 that I mentioned, try to keep it up to date with the times and with, science as things change. So those are kind of the different roles that DEP plays. And then this slide, I wanted to touch on where shoreline zoning actually physically applies throughout the state. So Maine has a lot of natural resources. Shoreline zoning doesn't apply to all of them. It applies to most of them. And specifically, we have definitions for where shoreline zoning standards or regulation apply. So most great ponds and lakes, streams, rivers, coastal wetlands, otherwise known as the ocean, and then most freshwater wetlands and tributary streams. So these are all defined in the shoreline zoning ordinance. And if they apply to an area, they will be on the shoreline zoning map, which can be found in the town office, sometimes online, or DEP can help folks find that information. So more specifically, on the ground, these areas extend 250 feet from that resource. So from the pond or the lake, the river, the ocean, the area where these rules and regulations apply is within that 250 feet. The only exception are streams. Those only extend 75 feet. So kind of some general basics there. The next section are going to be talking about structures. Pretty relevant topic. Structures are basically the hot topic in shoreline zoning. So I wanted to provide at least a definition, because shoreline zoning's definition is pretty all-encompassing when it comes to structures. So the nitty-gritty of it is a structure is anything constructed or erected on or in the ground. And that's regardless of the time, if it's there temporarily or permanently. It could meet the definition of a structure under shoreline zoning. There's a few exemptions like septic systems, wells, utility lines, fences. However, most things can fall under that category of a structure. Your gazebo, your Quonset hut, your brick fireplace, these are all structures. So I bring this up because in shoreline zoning, structures need to meet a setback. Some people might be more familiar with this than others, but I wanted to at least provide some basics and some visuals for setbacks. So setbacks are important because I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. But stormwater runoff is a big deal in the shoreline zone. So the reason for having a setback for structures is kind of twofold. We want to protect the structure itself. We want to protect your house or your shed or your deck. And then we also want to protect the water body or the resource. So structures create impervious surfaces. And so when rain falls on these hard structures, they're impervious. This rainwater will pick up and it'll carry sediment and phosphorus and pollutants, and it'll carry it across the property and into a resource. So we refer to this as like sheet flow, and it moves pretty quickly. And when you have a lot of structures or impervious surfaces, it makes it harder for this runoff to slow down and soak up before it hits your bluff or your edge of your shoreline or the resource. So the more time we can give the runoff to slow down and soak up, the better. So that's why we came up with some general setbacks to say can we give this runoff some time? Can we give it 100 feet, 75 feet to kind of slow down and do its thing before it hits the resource? So that's why we have those current standards of most popular 175 feet. We have a few shoreline zoning districts that have different setbacks, but for the majority of your districts, 100 or 75 feet is going to be your setback. So for you folks on the ocean, 75 feet is going to be your setback, unless you're in a special district where there might be some lesser or further back setbacks. It's all dependent on some certain criteria. So I can always circle back on that. Shoreline zoning districts are going to change depending on the resource and the use. You're going to see some fishery districts, some commercial districts. So it all depends on what's on a town map. So I can definitely circle back on that a little bit later if we want to dive into it. A popular topic in shoreline zoning are grandfathered structures. We refer to those as non-conforming structures. These are structures that were built or put in place, or their uses that were established before a town ever had a setback rule or any kind of shoreline zoning standards. So these non-conforming structures, they're legally existing. They can be maintained. They can be repaired. They can even be expanded, made a little bit bigger or taller. They can be moved around on the property, but we refer to them as non-conforming structures, and we have pretty specific standards when dealing with those. So I won't dive too much into this, but it is relevant. It became a lot more relevant with the storms the last couple of years. But when a structure is replaced or proposed to be tore down and rebuilt, the town can go through what's called a greatest practical extent review. And this is basically helping a property owner make their structure a little more conforming, their lot a little more conforming. So if there's an opportunity to kind of start from scratch, let's say a house needs to be rebuilt or a new foundation needs to be put in, this gives an opportunity to meet that setback possibly, and it's very site dependent. So this next slide has some of the criteria that a town looks at when going through this process. So this is something you might see take place in a town. They might say, hey, this structure is going to be replaced. Let's see if there's an area on the lot further back from the water where we can replace it, rebuild it. Sometimes you can't move a structure back. There's other things in the way, like a septic system or another structure, or there's too much vegetation that would have to be removed. So again, very site-specific process. And in a lot of cases, you can't move it back, and that's okay. But the town has this in their ordinance. So it's a requirement when it hits certain thresholds, but just wanted to throw that in there and can dive into that a little bit more if we want to. So a theme that I'm going to touch on a lot is vegetation. In shoreline zoning, we love vegetation, we love trees, we love shrubbery. So one thing that is referenced is lot coverage. Basically in the shoreline zone, the 250 from the resource, we like to have a lot of vegetation. So structures are limited. In the shoreline zone, you can only have 20% of the lot as not vegetated. So if you break that down, we're basically saying 80% of the lot in the shoreline zone needs to be vegetated. So non-vegetated means your structures, your driveways, your house, your garage. So we kind of keep those numbers where they are, just to keep things vegetated and nice and stable in the shoreline zone. Let's see here. Oops, I think I skipped one. There we go. This slide I threw together kind of quickly, so I'm sorry if it looks funny, but I wanted to touch on that runoff that I mentioned before and speak to non-point source pollution. When you're removing vegetation and adding structures, you're going to get impervious area, like I mentioned before. This is relative to our setbacks, and this is why we don't like a lot of hard structure in the shoreline zone. Because the more impervious area you have, the worse off the water body tends to be. So this runoff carries that phosphorus, it carries that dirt, it carries that sediment debris, and it carries it across a property and it eats away at a shoreline and it ends up in the water. So property values can be affected, your recreational activities can be affected, marine industries, wildlife, your water quality overall. These are all relative. So that's why we kind of focus so heavily on structures and vegetation in the shoreline zone. So communities can start to see some signs that there's an increase in this non-point source pollution. We see this with a decrease in water quality. We see more algal blooms. We see sediment buildups. We see a change in wildlife habitat. So this just ties back into why we promote mindful development so much. And, we want to see those bluffs stable and we want to see properties remain intact. So the next couple of slides I put in because they're technically in our structure kind of topic, but shoreline stabilizations, very relevant these days. Our chapter 1000 that I mentioned earlier, our base template for shoreline zoning standards, we've put in some shoreline zoning, some shoreline stabilization standards in 2015. There hadn't been any before, but with an increase in erosion and issues on the shoreline, we wanted to make sure that towns were prepared for these type of projects. So nowadays, a shoreline stabilization project, a riprap project, the town's gonna require a planning board review. We prefer access by barge if feasible. Your vegetation removal is gonna be limited to what's necessary. And then upon completion of the project, revegetation is required. So I'm gonna touch on some bluff and shoreline stabilization stuff a little bit later, but just wanna throw that in there. And then another hot topic in the shoreline zoning world, especially recently, are ADUs, accessory dwelling units. I just wanted to throw this out there. If people have questions, I can circle back on this, but in shoreline zoning, we consider an ADU as a second dwelling. So an ADU is great and a wonderful way to kind of, increase housing. But it isn't exempt from your local shoreline zoning rules. So just keep that in mind and work with the town if that's something that you're looking to do. So again, as you can see, there's a theme. I love vegetation. I wanted to kind of just outline vegetation removal and some of those standards that most property owners are going to come up against when they are proposing vegetation removal. I kind of mentioned a few of these already, but vegetation is so important to intercept and infiltrate that stormwater runoff and is key to reducing the sediment and pollution, and also important for stabilizing your shoreline. In working around the state, I've seen a lot of examples of shoreline areas that are next to each other, different properties or properties, one or two lots away from each other. And each of these lots can react differently depending on the amount of vegetation they have in place in the shoreline area. The lots that had vegetation in a nice healthy area of root systems, they held up substantially to run off into these, increase in more intense storms that we're having. The lots right next to them that were void of vegetation and maybe just had a lawn area, they unfortunately tend to fail and erode substantially. So this is a big part of why I keep saying vegetation is important. So not only is it great for wildlife and providing shade, and that natural character of Maine, it also serves a function. So I just wanted to touch on that. You'll hear the word buffer a lot. So basically we wanted to put a good focus on areas right on the water. So if you're on a great pond or a river that flows to a great pond, you're going to have a special area, the vegetated buffer, and it extends 100 feet. And then if you're on another water body, or example, the ocean, you have a 75-foot area that's called the vegetated buffer. So they tend to mimic the setback in most scenarios, but shoreline zoning just puts some very specific rules for vegetation removal in this buffer area. So we put high value on that specifically. So we tend to limit the size of the canopy opening because that canopy is so crucial. And if you can maintain a well-distributed stand of trees, that's ideal. Trees can be removed. It's just done via a point system so that you can maintain that beautiful mix of vegetation. I'll go back to that picture. This is a good example of an overstory, some established trees. Then you have a mid-story, you have ground cover like your ferns, and then you have a duff layer on the ground, which is your pine needles and leaves. So this photo shows a great well-distributed stand of trees and vegetation, and is a good example. So you have specific rules for what you can do inside that buffer. It's not a flat out no, you can't touch vegetation or remove trees. It just needs to be done carefully and according to your town rules. So I won't read all of these. They're available in your town ordinance, but again, we just kind of focus on that buffer area. There are rules for outside the buffer, so it's not a free-for-all outside that buffer area, but it is a smaller set of rules. We just want to make sure that a healthy volume of trees are maintained in that area over a 10-year period. So basically don't clear cut it, but selective cutting is doable. So, and then real quickly, development can happen in a shoreline zone, and that's why we allow a certain amount of cleared openings, and that's what these standards are for. So inside the whole 250, you can have some cleared openings for a house that's permitted, or a garage or a driveway, but that overall canopy cover can't be just decimated and cut down. So we have some specific standards for that area. Super quickly, the Resource Protection District, like I said, I didn't dive into districts too much because I would need a lot more time, but Resource Protection District is one of the districts on the map, the town map. These areas have been identified by the town as sensitive and crucial. There's some conditions for putting in an area into resource protection. Some of these are bird habitat, steep slope, floodplain, or bluff areas or unstable shorelines. These are all going to be impacted quicker than some of your other areas that don't have those qualifying triggers that I mentioned. So in a resource protection district, development is still doable. It's just a little bit harder. It's a little stricter, and vegetation has a little more value in these areas. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up a little bit. So now that I've bored everyone with the rules, I like to just mention a few scenarios. I'm going to touch on a study that was done, but I found that working with folks throughout the state and the amount of travel that I do, most property owners, most town staff, planning board CEOs, they agree that shoreline zoning does work. It is a chunky set of rules, but these rules might not make sense to everybody, but in the end, they do work. And we see that because our state is beautiful. We have clean, clear lakes. We have healthy fisheries. And we also have an economy that's fueled partly by our healthy environment. So I just wanted to touch on that. And, I think a lot of folks agree with that, but I just wanted to provide some yeses to, does shoreline zoning do what it says? And to back that up, I also wanted to provide a study that was done, because while we can see these beautiful resources and we can see stable bluffs and we can see development done mindfully, I think touching on some of the science behind it and maybe like just scratching the surface. This was a study that was done back in 2011. I thought it would be nice to bring this up. It's relevant to shoreline zoning. the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation wanted to do a study in their own state in regards to shoreland zoning on their lakes. Vermont had less strict standards for shoreland zoning than Maine did. So when they wanted to do this study back in 2011, they didn't really have a good base, or, they didn't have good lake areas to start with because their rules were kind of lax. So they came up to Maine and they said, can we please do a study with you guys? Let's look at your lakes. Let's look at some criteria, and let's crunch some numbers and see if all these rules work. So what they did, they looked for some sites throughout the state on lakes, and they found 36 sites that under Maine's shoreland zoning rules would meet the definition of developed. So these have houses on them. They might have a driveway or a pier or pathway, but these properties followed the rules that are in place in Maine for shoreland zoning. And then they found 13 kind of reference sites that were undeveloped. They haven't been touched. And so by taking these sites, they looked at a handful of criteria. I won't dive into the weeds. It's a cool study if anyone wants to read it, but they basically just compared a handful of variables and did their graphs and their studies, crunched the numbers. And what it came down to was there's no statistical difference between these sites that in Maine are technically developed and the sites in Maine that were undeveloped, which is pretty cool to see, because you would think a developed site would have a pretty big impact on the lake. But they found through this study that they were basically the same. And so shoreline zoning standards were a good tool to provide good habitat and good resources. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then as an example, in Vermont, this is what a developed lot would look like. And then in Maine, this is what a developed lot could look like. You can kind of see the difference between the two. Folks can enjoy their property, enjoy their land, but also have a nice stable shoreline and beautiful resource. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I wanted to touch on a cool program with DEP that is in the works. It'll be out soon. The website is up and running now, but it's called Our Shore, and it's going to be super helpful, especially these coastal communities. It's going to be a nature-based guide for helping stabilize shoreline areas. So I will provide some more contact information, but I just wanted to quickly plug this program because there's some events coming up, and this is something that's going to be really cool and a good resource. So it's based out of our non-point source training center. It's going to have some on-site assistance for property owners, some training courses, and some guidance and resources. So the point of the program is helping people assess the source of erosion on their properties, identify what kind of erosion they're dealing with, and then explore different design recommendations. Every site is different. So in Maine, there's not a one size fits all in regards to stabilizing your shoreline. For years, putting riprap has been kind of the go-to, and that's nothing wrong with that, but we're seeing that a combination of riprap and vegetation or other materials is also doing a great job. So we want to promote, site-specific kind of evaluations and see what works for everybody. So this program can also help navigate the regulatory process, help folks with their permitting, help folks decide, is there something they can do without a permit? Is it exempt? Do they need permits from Army Corps and IF&W? Like, what do they need exactly? So this will kind of be like a one-stop for folks who have specific shoreline issues, and they can reference it and reach out and get some help. So like I said, for homeowners, for contractors, for resource managers, community leaders, it's just going to be really cool. So here's the context for this program. I can share this with folks later if you'd like, but John McLean runs our non-point source training center. Jordan Kimball now works for John. And then Nathan Robbins is our climate change specialist. So he is going to be a good resource if folks want to grab these contacts and just say, hey, can I get on the list once this is up and running? Or go to the website and see what's available. Here's a preview of just one of the guidance documents that they're working on. It's like I said, it's going to help folks identify what type of erosion am I dealing with? What does it look like if I put riprap in? How do I do that? You know, what's the cost of doing a DIY stabilization with just plants? Maybe I don't want to spend all that money, or what's the cost if I want to do a heftier project? But it's just, you know, seeing some of the things that are coming out for that is pretty exciting. So I just wanted to at least sneak preview that for you guys. A few more quick slides, kind of like news and updates. Legislation is always changing, and some of the shoreland zoning and DEP changes that we've seen over the last year or two. LD 2059 ties together shoreland zoning and our Natural Resources Protection Act, basically saying if you go to your town and you get your permit for your shoreline stabilization project, DEP is going to also review your project and make sure that it matches the shoreline zoning. So it just kind of ties the two together, make sure they match up. LD 2101 gives more authority to towns to enforce violations. So that's great for towns who might be having some trouble with enforcement. And then LD 2030, that's a little bit older, but that was just a flood and storm response bill that came out. People probably already have these, but I just wanted to throw out some of our storm recovery resources and then some contacts for DEP. So in the Bangor office, we have licensors and we have field staff. So those licensors under NERPA, the Natural Resources Protection Act, they can discuss and review a proposal to do a new pier, a shoreline stabilization project. They can work with property owners to get what they need. And then our field staff can come out and do site visits and talk to property owners and help them out as well. So our field staff is great to be that first step. Maybe you have a concern on your property. Maybe you have something that might be a stream, but you're not sure. Maybe you're not sure if you need a permit for what you want to do. Our field staff would be your first call because they can get out there, take a look and help you out. So I just wanted to provide the Bangor region contact there for you guys. And then this is us. This is my team. We're 4 people, so we have a lot of area to cover, but everybody on the team works very hard and does a lot of travel, but we are always available. So if folks want to reach out with questions, if they want us to do a site visit or a training, if a town wants to do some outreach, give us a call. Colin Clark runs the program. He's out of Augusta. He's been running the program for a while. We have Jeff down in Portland, and now Ross has been here for about a year. He's up in Northern Maine, making sure Northern Maine is covered. So just wanted to give the contact info, and I'll put my email at the end in the chat box as well. So I'll leave it for questions, but as I wrap up, I just wanted to give a shout out for a couple of events and some educational stuff that's coming up. I think Brooke's going to put it in the chat, but that Our Shore program that I mentioned, we're going to be doing, DEP's doing a workshop in Orono on November 20th. So if that workshop seemed something of interest to you, you can go to DEP or reach out to me and register and come to that event. It's free. So that'll be a good opportunity to learn more about that program. And then Nathan Robbins for the Our Shore program is also helping put together some workshops. They're called Resilient Shoreline workshops. There's 3 on the schedule at the moment. One of them will be in Blue Hill. So Brooke's going to put those in the chat as well, and I can give people info if they want it. But these are going to be evening events for property owners, for developers, for engineers, for contractors. And it's they're from 5:30 to 8:30, and dinner is included, bonus. So these are opportunities to hear from DMR, IF&W, the Geological Survey, and then DEP's licensing staff. We're going to talk about resilient shorelines, the permitting process, what's new, what's going on, and then also kind of set up shop and have like office hours. So folks can choose to meet with somebody and show them photos or talk about their site specifically. So I just wanted to plug those as well, because those are really cool, and an opportunity for folks to meet us and say hello and learn things. So but yeah, that's about it. I was short and sweet.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. So yeah, I think the bottom line with this is if you want to add or remove anything near the shore, please reach out to Jessica or someone on her team.
Yes, it's always easier to touch base first. Enforcement's not fun for everybody. So if you have questions, reach out first before you want to do your project. A lot of things are exempt and don't need a permit or are not an issue, but it doesn't hurt to ask. So no one enjoys having the town say, hey, what's going on, or a neighbor get involved or whatever. So if you want to remain anonymous, you can do that as well with our team. So just use us as much as you can. That's what we're here for. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, as Eli said, this is the Q&A portion of the talk. So you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, or if you want to put things in the chat. I did put in the chat, I hope everyone can see, that the workshop that Jess mentioned in Blue Hill will be at the Consolidated School on November 13. And if anyone wants more information about that, can they reach out to you, or is there a better...
Yeah, they can reach out to me,
Okay.
or John McLean or Nate Robbins. So I can try to cut and paste those contacts real quick into the chat too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because that's a great opportunity to see something in person as well.
Yeah.
So Eli and I are going to, as you're doing that, Jessica, we're going to go through some questions. I'll start with the first one whenever you're ready.
Yep, go ahead. You're okay.
What is the best way to address situations when the vegetation and revegetation practices do not meet the standards?
That's a great question. We throw that at me again.
So what is the best way to address situations when the vegetation and revegetation practices do not meet the standards?
Yeah, so the town ordinance has pretty specific standards for revegetation. So if there was a violation and someone removed too much vegetation, not knowing that they weren't supposed to, or maybe it was just knowingly, whatever the case, the town is going to kind of work with a property owner to bring the site back into compliance, we call it. So if a property owner is involved with the town, they're usually going to do a revegetation plan to make sure that it meets the standards. And that way there's no longer, an open enforcement case against them. So in regards to the rules, I know not everything can be perfect, but if they can meet that plan and work with the town to bring it back into compliance, that's always going to be the best bet. So we often defer to a qualified professional. That way a property owner isn't stuck with figuring out what plantings should I use, how many trees do I need. That's why we defer to an arborist or someone who's qualified to say, all right, this site is technically in violation. There's too much vegetation that's been removed. How can we work to bring it back? And that's where that plan will come into play. So we kind of just defer to the experts on that stuff. So yeah, hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next question is pretty simple. An attendee is asking if you wouldn't mind sharing the slides.
Oh, yes.
With everyone.
Of course. Yes. Either, I don't know what the best way to do it. If they want to email me, I can send it, but absolutely. Because
I think
we have a lot of.
You can send it to me too, Jessica, and we can send it to the people who are on the call. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
And we also, on our DEP website for shoreland zoning, we do have some resources and some general handouts and some guidance. So short of reading the chapter 1000, which is 80 pages, we have some condensed, nice, easy handouts on our website as well that touches on vegetation, revegetation, setbacks, all that fun stuff. So that's also an option too.
Okay, the next question. I wish to stabilize my ocean shorefront. How do I request a site visit to get ideas for the best plan?
That's a great question. So right now, DEP doesn't have like a consulting team that can kind of come out and do that step for you. Right now, I say that because that Our Shore program is going to fill that void, which is exciting because once that's in play, folks can reach out to that program and say, can I have a consultation? Can I have some guidance? And so that will take place once that program is up and running. Right now, we have our licensors who review and give people permits for that type of work, but they are not consultants or engineers. So when something like this comes in, you can definitely talk to our staff. You can talk to the licensors or have our field staff come out. However, the best bet is to have a qualified professional or an engineer, or sometimes landscape companies can do this kind of work too. So do a little bit of research to see if there's someone that can do that step for you, because the next step after that is getting involved with our licensors and our, our permitting staff. So, we have an on-call and a general inquiry website, but unfortunately, like I said, right now, we don't have anyone that can come out and do those kind of, here's what kind of plan would work for you. That I wish we did. I wish it was free and I wish we could do that. But at this stage, we just have to kind of say, find someone local or ask around, do that Google search to see if there's a firm or a consultant that can come out and kind of do that for you. But we can be involved along the way with permitting and questions. And so use us as much as you can. It doesn't hurt to reach out. We can definitely do what we can and provide some contacts and info. So.
Yeah, thank you.
The next question is, how do DEP and DMR overlap concerning protection of intertidal vegetation and rockweed?
Oh, it's an awesome question. So DEP technically kind of starts at the, I'm going to reference the ocean because that's the easiest kind of what we're focusing on. Shoreline zoning standards start at the highest astronomical tide line. So that's where we're measuring. We're going to start at that line and go inland. And so that's where our standards, our jurisdiction, our regulations come into play. Below that hat line or astronomical tide line is where a lot of that the marsh and the eelgrass come into play, but we don't have any jurisdiction there. But that being said, DEP has protections over, mapped habitats and certain things. So our licensing group would be involved in reviewing any kind of impacts to marsh or mapped eelgrass, and they work side by side with DMR on those type of projects. So for example, if someone wants to put in a brand new pier on the coast, and there could be some shading impacts to some marsh or some direct impacts to eelgrass, our licensors would work to make sure that the project is minimizing those impacts, avoiding them if possible, and they work side by side with DMR as kind of consultants to say, how is this marsh grass high value? Is this proposed project, kind of meet your standards, and how do you feel about it? So we work side by side with them, but unfortunately, shoreline zoning kind of starts at that line and goes inland. So we don't touch on anything below that tide line, but that being said, it's not ignored. It's just done by our licensors and other staff. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is more of a comment you can maybe address.
Yeah.
Wildfire mitigation / prevention guidelines seem to conflict with shoreline zoning.
Yeah, so I've recently been kind of looking over these things. Safety is first, and in a local ordinance, there's a land use table. This table kind of calls out what's allowed, what isn't allowed, what's allowed with a permit, that kind of thing. Wildfire prevention activities are allowed in every district and every resource. So there's never a scenario where we're saying, don't be safe and don't prevent wildfires or damage to your house or your well-being. So I've kind of looked at some of the standards that the wildfire prevention steps have, and I haven't been able to find anything that directly contradicts them. So Again, vegetation can be removed carefully and done with a point system. The standards that I've found with the wildfire stuff is more for clearing like dead brush and just maintaining a nice, safety net around your house. So we don't want to conflict with them. Safety's first. So if there's ever a situation where someone's like, I have these specific standards, someone told me to do this, or I read this, we can definitely look into it and help out. But we definitely work side by side with that kind of regulation and want to focus on safety paramount. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Next question is, could you please remind us about the time of the Blue Hill workshop on November 13th?
Perfect. Yes. That's a great question.
I have it right here, Jess. I'll pop it in the
Okay.
chat.
Thank you.
So the Blue Hill workshop, it is November 13 from 4:30 to 7:30.
Yep.
I'm going to put this in the chat here.
Awesome. And I'll be there, and one of our licensors should be there as well. And so if there's people who want to talk shop or hang out and discuss or bring pictures of their property and say, please help, or what can I do, or, whatnot, we'll be there that's kind of the focus on these workshops, to mingle with people and help out. So, we'll have plenty of staff and some info at those. So.
Awesome. But do people need to register for those?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Through, I can share that as well, through who they're through. Let me see if I can pull it up and throw it in real quick.
So I see, is it Alan Kratz? I see an email here.
Yep.
Okay.
Here, I got it. I can cut and paste if you want.
Okay, perfect.
we're tag teaming the chat. Awesome.
Could you send that again to everybody, Jess, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome.
So you just change it from host and panelists to everyone.
Yeah, it's not giving me that option. Maybe I don't have permissions.
Okay.
No,
I can do it then. I'm going to just
Cutting-
copy and paste what you put.
a lot of cutting and pasting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a, we don't have there's only been like one handout made for these. So sorry to throw it on everybody last minute. They're a work in progress. So we're just trying to spread the word. But if you want to reach out to me or one of the other staff that I mentioned earlier about more info, we can definitely provide that. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll go to the next question in the Q&A. It's my turn, right, Eli? I
think so. Yeah, sure.
So in our area, saltwater algae growth has increased markedly after riprap without revegetation. It is not on our shoreland. What should we do?
Oh, I wish I could help. That sounds more like a DMR question. So I'm sorry. We don't work really below, like I said, that tide line, and unfortunately not super involved in the science of that type of stuff. But if that person wants to shoot me an email, I can try to hook them up with someone at DMR. I'm happy to do that. So I wish I was more involved in that, but unfortunately, just structures and setbacks over here.
Next question is, do all requests for a permit require a site visit from DEP?
So I guess in regards to a DEP permit, so you have DEP permits under the Natural Resources Protection Act, and those don't always require a site visit. We just throw that out there as free consultation to help people navigate. So it's not required. A lot of times folks who do these bigger projects, the riprap or the brand new pier, they're using a consultant on their behalf to pull together the application info, the site photos, all the paperwork, and they'll submit it to DEP for review. So those consultants might do that site visit, or an engineer might do a site visit. So it's not required by DEP staff themselves. DEP staff might come out or ask for a site visit if they think the project doesn't meet their set of standards. So again, DEP projects, we try to avoid and minimize impacts to our resources as best as we can. So if they see a project that kind of has some red flags, they might ask to do a site visit, but it's not a requirement. We also have smaller permits. They're called permit by rules. And these are quick, more like DIY, less impactful permits. There's a real quick turnaround for those. And those are reviewed by that field staff that I mentioned earlier. So those also don't require a site visit, and those are real easy to apply for and to usually obtain. So site visit not required, but we're available if you want. So.
Sorry, Brooke, I didn't mean to skip the long one. I realized I accidentally did that.
That's okay, I got it. Okay, the next one, Jess. I am a part owner in a property in unorganized territories off the coast in Penobscot Bay. We have a bluff that is deteriorating, and we have looked at stabilization resources like our shore and have some plans to put in swales and vegetation. Are your field specialists available to do a site visit in this area before we begin? And what kind of licensing is required in unorganized territory?
So that's a great question. Throughout the state, for those that might not be familiar, we have our organized territories and unorganized. DEP has jurisdiction over those organized territories. And then the Land Use Planning Commission, the LUPC, they are the DEP of those unorganized territories. So they are going to be your go-to for permitting, site visits and stuff like that. So while we would love to help out, it's almost like stepping into their territory. So if you are in an unorganized territory, reaching out to the LUPC would be your best bet. So they're going to have licensors just like we do and field staff. So they should be able to kind of provide that, that type of assistance for you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So we don't have any more open questions at this time. We did throw a lot of resources at everybody in the chat about the workshops, other contacts, people to talk to about our shore later on. Jessica, put your email in there as well.
Perfect.
If people want to reach out to you. And again, if you want to send me the PowerPoint slides, we can share that more widely. But please reach out to Jessica with questions. She's amazing at her job. She's great at what she does and is very, very helpful. So thank you so much, Jess, for all of that information with us today. And I also want to thank everybody for joining us. Viewers like you are the reason why we can do these programs for free. So if you've been a donor for us or IHT in the past, we really, really thank you and appreciate it. If you're interested in donating, please visit our websites to both or either organization. It's really easy to donate on the website. So thank you if you've done that, or if you'd like to, thank you in advance. Next month, our Friends from the Fields will be on November 13, I believe. It is with a veterinarian professor emeritus from Tufts. He studies common loons and has a long mortality study that he's worked on since the 80s and lives in Maine and knows a lot about the loons in Maine. So please join us for that. But again, Jessica, thank you so, so very much for joining us and for sharing all of this and generating this discussion. It was a really great Q&A. Actually, I think another one Eli ran in.
Oh yeah, we have another question here, right at the bell. Do you have a list of consultants who can develop a plan?
So we don't have a list of consultants. As a state agency, unfortunately, we're not allowed to kind of say, hey, use these guys, because it would look like preference. That being said, we usually tell people, ask your neighbors or ask your town staff. They can sometimes provide folks in the area. We also have a list of certified contractors, something I didn't mention in the presentation, but if a contractor is working in the shoreland zone, they need to be certified through the state to do so. And so through John McLean's team, he certifies those folks. So on John's website, I'll see if I can put it in quickly. But if you just Google Maine DEP certified erosion control, there's a list of certified contractors. So that might be a little more specific to who can do work in your area and they're certified to do so. But the Our Shore program, the new program, that's going to be a great resource. And I think one of the goals is to have a list of people. If you're in Deer Isle, here are 3 or 4 people that can do this work. So that's one of the things in Our Shore that we're excited about. So TBD.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's it for now. Unless you reach out to one of us in the future, please feel free. But thank you again, Jessica. Thank you,
Thank
Eli,
you.
for
Thank
being
you.
the co-host today. And again, thanks for everybody who joined us. I am going to stop recording now.